Hello, everyone out there in YouTube world, social media world, the world, wherever you might be watching this from today. Welcome to another episode of Musings with MGL. I am, as always, your host, MGL. And today I'm going to have another legal topic and or political topic and or emotional, moral topic, whatever you want to talk about. Today's topic is going to be as it relates to felons and firearms. And what I mean by that is, in America, if you are a convicted felon under the federal statutes and pretty much every state statute in the land, your firearm rights are forfeited. So you get convicted of a felony, no matter what the felony is. It can be as simple as bouncing a check that is more than $300 or $1,000, all the way up to murder. Whatever the felony is, you can't possess a firearm, and that's essentially forever. So in other words, felonies, not to be crass, but I always say this, felonies are a lot like herpes, which means once you get them, they never go away. Now, some states do have provisions that allow you to restore your firearm rights even as a convicted felon. For example, in the state of Florida, we have a clemency process where you can file an application and go through a clemency process through the governor's office. And if you qualify, the governor can sign essentially a pardon, but it doesn't get rid of your charge. It basically just says, even though you have a felony conviction, you can still now have a firearm. And that then allows you to possess a firearm. So the question becomes, why is that? And is that fair? So in the state of Florida, a legislator here has introduced a bill that basically says, once you've served your time, you can get your gun rights back. We had a similar thing like this recently in Florida when it comes to voting rights, and you see that in a lot of states across the country when it comes to voting rights, and you see a lot of politicians say that it should be automatic with voting rights. In other words, voting rights, like your firearm rights, when you become a convicted felon, you lose your right to vote. Now, once again, most states have a process for you to restore that right, but it is automatically taken away when you become a convicted felon. There's been this great push, and again, it happened here in Florida a couple years ago. We actually had a constitutional amendment, a state of Florida constitutional amendment to fix it, and most other states are doing it. You even saw politicians like Bernie Sanders basically say that convicted felons should be allowed to vote, even if they're sitting and still currently in jail. But most people have the concept that once you've completed your sentence, right, you've served your time, you've served your probation, you've paid your restitution, once you've completed your sentence, that you should get your voting rights back. Okay, I think it's most of Americans at this point probably agree with that concept. So then the question is, why doesn't the same thing apply to the Second Amendment? In other words, you have a constitutional right to vote. You have a constitutional right to possess a firearm. Those are taken away from you when you get a felony conviction. When your felony conviction is over, those rights should be restored to you. That's the theory. That's what people are saying. A lot of people are saying that should apply to voting rights, but it shouldn't apply to Second Amendment rights. And my question is why? Like legally, logically, why? Don't give me the moral, emotional stuff. Well, obviously, firearms are more dangerous than voting. You know, a lot of people may find that not necessarily true, because sometimes voting is a way more dangerous to people than firearms are. But if you're looking at a strict legal argument, meaning these are the rights that the Constitution gives you, these rights are taken away when you get convicted. When you serve your time, why would we only give you this right, but not this right? What's the difference between the two legally and logically? And the bottom line is there is no difference. There is no difference. Morally, people are going to tell you there's a difference because, again, one is more dangerous and one is not. But legally, there is no difference. I personally have a problem with why you lose these rights when you become a convicted felon anyway. I mean, the punishment for committing a crime is the punishment. Go to jail, go to prison, get probation, community control, whatever it is. Like, that's the punishment. Why things like your civil rights, your right to vote and possess a firearm or whatever, are tied to the criminal justice system, I have no idea. I don't know why driver's license suspensions are tied to the criminal justice system. But it is. The criminal justice system doesn't just have your punishment. There's all these ancillary punishments that come along with that, and one of them is losing your constitutional rights, your civil rights. And I never understood that concept anyway. So I don't think any of your rights should be taken away when you commit a crime, other than, your right to freedom, because you can go to jail and be punishment, and everything else. Those are direct punishments to your crime. Why your other civil rights should be taken away is beyond me. So that's one problem that I have with this concept. The other problem that I have with this concept is what I said before. Why is one okay to be restored and not the other? If you look at it legally and logically, it doesn't make any sense. And even if you look at it morally, so the bill in Florida has certain crimes that are exempt from it. In other words, if it's a violent crime, attempted murder or rape or whatever, you can never get your gun rights back no matter what. But if it's a non-violent crime, a drug possession or shoplifting or whatever, you can get it back. And part of the issues with felonies is there are so many felonies out there these days, it's ridiculous. There's a book out there that says at any given point, every American is violating like 7 felonies because of how draconian the laws have gotten. So that's another issue that I have with this concept in general is there's so many felonies out there that you can easily pick up a felony. You can shoplift one shirt from Saks Fifth Avenue, and if it's more than $300 in the state of Florida, you're looking at a felony. At least you were. They just raised the amount. But for the longest time, if you shoplifted anything more than $300, it was a felony. So you could go to Walmart and steal 50 things, and it's not $300 and be a misdemeanor, but you steal one shirt from Saks, and it's a felony. That doesn't make any sense to me. If you bounce a check knowing you don't have enough money in your bank account, that could be a felony. If you contract without a license in Florida and you don't have like workers' comp or whatever, these white collar things, that could be a felony. So the number of felonies out there are ridiculous. So it's really easy for somebody to end up with a felony on their record. It's way easier than most people think it is. And the fact that the felonies never go away is also very crazy. Like you could be convicted of something from the 70s. I see it every day because I do a lot of restoration of rights in Florida, like I talked about before, that there's a process for that. And people get convictions like when they're 20 years old in 1975. And again, because it's a felony, it's on there forever and you can never have a firearm again. That is a ridiculous concept as well. And I think most people agree with those two things. Most people on the street, if you ask, they'll tell you that certain things should not be felonies and that felonies should never stay on your record forever. At some point, you should be able to remove them because you've turned your life around or whatever. But those two things don't exist. So until they fix those two concepts on felonies in general, you're always going to have them. You're always going to have the problem with firearm rights. But the biggest issue that I have is, again, when you read the Second Amendment, there's no conditions in there. It doesn't say the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, comma, unless you've committed a felony. Like, it's not in there. It's an absolute amendment. Shall not be infringed. There's no qualifier on that. It doesn't say unless you committed a felony or unless you've been convicted of a felony or unless you've served your time. Like, there are no qualifiers on that amendment. So in my mind, as a strict constitutionalist and reading that, there is no constitutional ability to take away your firearm rights just because you became a felon, regardless of the crime. And again, this, people may disagree with me, and this is where the moral part comes in. I'm not saying that I'm okay as a person, as a father or a human being with somebody convicted of a violent crime with getting their guns back. But what I'm saying is the Constitution doesn't give the government the ability to do that. If you don't like it, there's a mechanism for that, which is to change the Constitution. You can amend the Second Amendment and put these qualifiers in there. Shall not be infringed unless you're convicted of a violent crime or a felony or whatever. Like, you can do that. But you can't, in my opinion, as a state or even as a federal government, add qualifiers to that start knocking people off the list of being able to have firearms. So for me, it's not even a matter of whether it's a violent crime or a nonviolent crime or whatever. I don't think constitutionally, legally, you can take somebody's firearm rights away just for committing a felony. Again, whether you agree with it or not, there are things that I morally agree with, but as a lawyer and a strict constructionalist and a constitutionalist, I can't legally agree with it. So, for example, as a libertarian-minded person, I don't know why we have drug laws. Drugs should be legal. If people are dumb enough to smoke meth or cocaine or whatever, they get whatever consequences they come. Now, morally, obviously, that could be a bad thing because that affects their life. It could affect their jobs. It could certainly affect their family and society as a whole. So from a moral standpoint, I understand why you wouldn't want wouldn't want all these drugs out there. But from a legal and a constitutional and a libertarian and a freedom-loving individualist person, I don't know how the government can have laws telling you what you can and can't do. If you want to be stupid, that's up to you. And I know there may be consequences to that, but you can deal with those consequences as a society without taking away people's individual rights and freedom. So the firearm is the same way. I certainly don't morally, it doesn't set right with me, obviously, to have somebody who has a violent past being able to own a firearm. But the issue for me is we would have to deal with that as a society. And I think the way you deal with that is by arming yourself as a good law-abiding citizen, so you can stop that person and protect yourself and your family. But if you truly believe in individualism and freedom and small government and what the founders wanted and what the Constitution says, you can't be on the other side of this, in my opinion. So I support these restoration laws for felons. I supported them when it came to the right to vote, and I support them when it comes to the right to firearms. If you're going to give one right back when they're done serving their sentence, you should give the other. If you want to put qualifiers on it, I personally would disagree with those qualifiers from a legal standpoint, but at least you're moving in the right direction, and you're recognizing that somebody who committed a crime 30 years ago, who's led a good life since then and pay their debt to society, should not be forever barred from exercising their constitutional right. If you're going to give them back their right to vote, you got to give them back their right to possess firearms. So that's my opinion on that. There's a lot of those laws going out there. We'll see what happens. So if you disagree with me, go ahead and comment down below. Comment, like, share, subscribe, etc., etc. I really appreciate it. It helps keep the channel growing. So thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay open, and as always, carry on.